Kentucky Christian University is a private, nonprofit university located in the beautiful foothills of eastern Kentucky. For over a century, KCU has been transforming the hearts and minds of students through a Christ-centered academic community that is both academically rigorous and intimately personal. Begin the journey to the career of your dreams today at kcu.edu.
Good morning. Delighted to be with you. I often avoid these wireless mics. I had an interim ministry in Florida once, or several months. Folk were really kind to me, and I enjoyed helping them in their transition period. But one week, they would mute me during the singing time, and one week the guy goes, "Hey, we were listening to you during the music. You sing awful." I know, but why were you listening to me? So I usually keep it off now so that, somehow it doesn't end up on YouTube or something. But hey, can I start by, on behalf of everyone at KCU, offering our condolences at the loss of your elder. Those are traumatic things, and we're praying for you, and you all take care. It'll be okay. I want to tell you a little about the school, but I'm anxious to get to this sermon. I'm pretty excited about what we're going to talk about. But KCU is going to be 105 years old in December 1st. And indeed, I am only the 6th president. You do the math. There's a bit of a longevity expectation there if you accept this role that I happen to be privileged to serve in. We really do, as I view it, three things. The first thing that we do is we prepare leaders for the church, and that is an important thing. And we have a partnership with the local church. We work together with you. So first of all, thank you for your support. If you weren't aware, you support us very graciously each year. But what we need is for you to pray for God to raise up leaders from within your congregation that want to come to KCU and be trained to serve in ministry. I was accepted to then KCC, and I had everything done before I ever met a recruiter, because my local church raised me up and gave me opportunities to lead, challenged me to live a faithful life, and sent me off to be trained for ministry. That's the piece that you all do, is that you send us those that feel called to ministry. This is an important step because I'm not getting any younger, and others of us aren't getting any younger either in ministry, and we need to raise up another generation of leaders that will be faithful to the church, and KCU stands ready to train those folk. That is a huge priority of ours, and we'll continue to make that a focus. Second thing I see us doing is we train people who are probably going to work a job outside of the church, maybe in business or education or counseling or in our award-winning nursing program, and preach in the church. This bivocational minister is surfacing in a lot of different churches. In Kentucky, in Ohio, and West Virginia, there are a lot of very healthy churches that serve very important roles in their community, but really won't ever be large enough to fully sustain a minister and sustain their ministry programs. And so the rise of the bivocational minister we see as something important for us to be involved in. So every student that majors in business or nursing or education or pre-med, pre-law, whatever they want to major in, also minors, at least minors, in biblical studies. Because we feel like there's a really good chance that God will call some of our graduates to be bivocational ministers. But the third thing that we do is that we unashamedly provide a Christ-centered education for those that are interested in a career in business, or those that want to go to one of the best nursing programs in the nation. Our online RN to BSN our online master's degree in nursing was ranked number 10 in the nation. That's not among Christian schools. That was among everybody. We're the only faith-based school that made that list. Very proud of that program. Exceptional work there, what's going on. But that's not the only exceptional program. our business and leadership, our school of education, our pre-med, our pre-law, all those are exceptional programs. And we provide a place where Christ is lifted up. My daughter-in-law is about to finish her master's degree, or MSN, in the School of Nursing. And every time I see her, they live in Florida, every time I see her, she tells me what a joy it is to be able to express her faith in her classrooms. She did attend another school. I know that school. It's a fine school. But she would have never been able to have expressed her faith there. Her faith wouldn't have been encouraged. And I'll tell you, I meet with hospital leaders pretty regularly. So hospitals that you would probably know well, KDMC or St. Clair and Moorhead and a couple others. And each of them are coming to us because they say, we know you're graduates, and they care. They care. Well, we believe it's because there's a broader aspect to nursing. There's a broader aspect to business or to counseling or to education than just education. And we believe that the best educators, the best nurses, the best counselors are those who have a solid faith in Jesus Christ. And that's who we train at KCU. So I'll be out in the lobby. If you're interested in any of that, I want to talk to you. But I want you to know that KCU stands ready to serve you, and we want to do that. So I was telling Mark, what do we call you? You said I had to call you Holy Most Reverend Mark. Is that? Hey, I hope you appreciate Pastor Mark. You want to show him you appreciate him for a minute there? Yeah. I was telling him I'm in about 40 churches a year, which I very much enjoy, and I'm glad to do it. And I get to speak on, sometimes I get an assigned topic. Last week I was assigned the topic of self-control, which I thought was kind of ironic, and I worked on that. And so it was 2 services. I preached one service on self-control, and they said, hey, we got coffee. I go get some coffee, you know, and there's a whole row of donuts laid out there. I'm like, well, now I can't eat a donut, right? Because I just preached on self-control. So that was really a disappointing moment for me. But at any rate, I get to speak on a lot of different topics. I want to talk to you about a topic that is sometimes overlooked in Scripture, maybe because we're a little afraid to talk about it. But I'm not afraid because, you know, I won't be back for a while. So we're going to talk about money. Now, why are we going to talk about money? We're not going to talk about money about, hey, you need to give more to the church. Maybe you do. I don't know the answer to that. We're going to talk about money because as I look at society, I see the factor of money playing into all kinds of problems. I see the factor of money playing into struggles in marriages. I see the factor of money playing into our inability to engage in things we want to do at the church. I see debt burdening folk. And if you don't mind, I want to talk about that a little bit. You realize, and I suppose if you've done any reading on this at all, you may know some of these things, but 16 of the 38 parables that Jesus told mention money. Now, they're not all about using money, but they mention money in possessions in some way. You know, in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there are 288 verses that somehow mention money. That's 10%, if you want to do the math there. There are some teachings in Scripture that are really important for one generation to pass on to the next, or from one group of believers to pass on to the next. And I think that the appropriate view of money and possessions is probably one of those key things. We want to talk about this today. I want to talk about this today because it's my hope that as we use our possessions wisely, that God will bless our story. It will bless us as we try to do that. Now, I need to give you a little disclaimer here. I feel like a YouTube video, but I'm not a financial expert. I'm more of a student, I think, of using what God has blessed my family with well. I'll tell you that I'm very cheap. I like to use the word frugal, but I don't know that it really encaptures what I'm trying to say there. I don't like needless debt. I believe in carrying my own weight, and I believe in helping others. And so as I speak on this topic, understand that's really the platform that I probably am standing on, be it good or bad. So with that, I want to survey some comments that Jesus makes on money, and then I want to look at a parable. And I promise we won't be here all that long, but there's some interesting things there that were helpful to me. You know, Jesus often warned about the dangers of wealth and possessions. Not that wealth and possessions were dangerous, but that it was vulnerable to loss. And Jesus viewed it and taught of possessions as temporary. And yet some of those possessions we hang on so tightly to, we view them as almost eternal, don't we? And yet Jesus viewed them as temporary. You know, in Matthew 6, he encouraged us to seek the kingdom first. Seek the kingdom first. Because the kingdom is not temporary, it's permanent. Jesus contradicted the belief that the wealthy were blessed and the poor were cursed. It was a very common view out there. In fact, he often showed that material possessions can become a barrier to discipleship and even a potential distraction. Jesus did not condemn the wealthy, but he did also not condemn those who are poor. And if a middle class would have existed then, he wouldn't have condemned them either. He sees all people as being loved and cared for by him. And so whether you feel that you've been blessed with an abundance of possessions and resources, or whether it's tough getting by, understand that is not an indicator of God's love or care for you. Jesus emphasized generosity, particularly generosity to the poor. He also emphasized, and this is fascinating to me, he emphasized the role of the heart as we give. So picture yourself at Christmas time, and there's the bell, and you walk by, and you're like, you know what? It's Christmas time. I'm going to give a generous gift to this charity, and so you put a generous gift in there, and the Santa with the gauze beard says, well, that's a very generous gift. But where's your heart? I want to know where your heart's at before we let that stay in that kettle. Nobody's asking that. Nobody's asking that. People are happy and pleased with the external, just the external act of giving something. But Jesus looks at the heart even as we give, right? You see the widow giving a fraction of a penny, and Jesus is delighted with her. And you see the wealthy giving a minuscule fraction of what they have, and Jesus yawns, even though the amount is significantly more. It's the state of the heart as we give, as we take communion, as we give, as we worship. Jesus isn't just looking at the outside of us saying, oh, look, they're singing. Oh, look, they're giving. Oh, look, they're taking communion. No, he's looking at our hearts and wants to know, where are we in our relationship with him and in our relationship with those around us as we do those things. Jesus taught, and this is something that came to me, I wouldn't say later in life, but came to me past my youth, let's say. Jesus taught, as did the Apostle Paul, that there is joy. There is joy in being generous. It can be a lot of fun to be generous. That really never dawned on me earlier in my life. And there is joy in using our possessions as God would have us use them. Well, I want to take a look at a parable, Matthew 18, for some additional thoughts here. Now, Matthew 18 has a lot of material in it. There's the parable of the lost sheep. It talks about resolving conflict among believers. Those are important lessons there. But at the end of that chapter, or towards the end, there's this parable about forgiveness. Now, I want you to know, I know, it's a parable about forgiveness. It's not a parable about money. But I want to look at the main character within the parable and maybe make some observations about how he responds to the situation he finds himself in. Well, here we go, verse 23. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. I calculated that the other day, and it came out to a lot. More or less, as a rough estimate. Now, I just want you to put yourself in the mindset of that servant being called before the king. 10,000 bags of gold. Since he was not able to pay, no kidding, since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to pay the debt. You thought debt collectors were tough today, right? At this, the servant fell on his knees before him. Be patient with me, he begged, and I will pay back everything. An impossible promise, right? The servant's master took pity on him and canceled the debt and let him go away. Can you imagine how life-changing that would be? Canceled the debt. It's canceled. It's gone. But when the servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. I also calculated this. Not very much. He grabbed him, began to choke him. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. His fellow servant fell on his knees and begged him with the exact same phrase. Be patient with me, and I will pay it back. But that was not an impossible promise. That was a very doable feat. But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay back the debt. Well, that's obviously an impossible cycle, isn't it? He's not going to earn anything in prison. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged and went and told their master everything that had happened. The master called the servant in. You wicked servant, he said, I cancel all that debt of yours because you begged me. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? In his anger, the master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured, goodness, until he could pay back the debt he owed. Yeah, he's not paying that debt back. Now, this is clearly a parable about forgiveness, and there's plenty to learn there, and maybe at another time we could talk about that. But this parable also has this character in it, right? That I want to talk about his actions a little bit because they're concerning to me, because they remind me of us today. The first thing I would note for you there in verses 24 through 26 or so is that he clearly lived beyond his means. The ability and temptation for us to do that today is all over the place. My wife and I first got to Puerto Rico. Actually, I went, we had a newborn, so I went a couple weeks before to get a house and stuff. And we were selling our car back in the States and had a buyer, and it was all working out fine. So I went to a car dealer and I said, listen, I need a car. I can make a down payment, but my wife's coming in a week. She'll have the check. I'll come pay you off. Okay, he says. I don't know why he said okay, but he said okay. Okay, he says. So I leave with the car. Everything's all happy, and my wife comes, and I'm delighted to see her and our newborn child. And guess what I forgot? I forgot to pay for the car. So you know what I got in the mail? No, you probably don't. What I got in the mail was a loan paper. I said, so my only credit reference with this car dealer is I didn't keep my promise, and he's going to give me a loan. So easy to get credit. Do you know that I read just yesterday that 46%, according to one study, boy, I hope it's not 46% of us, 46% of people in the United States, I don't know what population they studied, 46% are still paying on their credit card charges from last year's vacation. We live beyond our means. And we convince ourselves we need to do that. Oh, the kids really needed that, or oh, I really needed a break, but we live beyond our means. And it gets us into a scenario very similar to our friend here, where suddenly there's a debt that we cannot possibly pay back. Oh, so I'll take a second job and I'll get a side gig, and I understand all those things. But the challenge then is, of course, we're away from our family more, we're maybe missing out on engaging with the church body more, and all of that gets us into a vicious cycle that is very difficult to get out of. I had a very good wrestling coach back in the day who, when he was showing us a certain move and somebody said, how do you get out of it? He said, don't get into it. Okay. Danger of us living beyond our means, credit cards, loans, and so forth, can put us in a bad spot. Please don't fall into the trap of always needing the newest thing, or always needing the shiniest thing, or always needing to take that trip or make that expense. Be careful. Be careful. Because what I see in this parable, what I see happening to this man is, it put him in a position where there was no way he could pay it back. Now, I don't, if your credit limit is 10,000 bags of gold, I want to talk to you after the service. But regardless, whatever it is, we've got to be careful. I'm tempted to keep circling that point, but I'm going to move on. But we live beyond our means, and we get ourselves in trouble. I talked to the students at the university about this topic of living beyond our means. We have chapel twice a week. It's required. It's who we are. You come to chapel. We even have an app to take attendance. We're so high-tech. But anyway, so I talked about living beyond your means there, and I said, you've got to be careful at this point in your life. Because there's a phrase called a poor college student, right? I mean, it's a phrase. Not all college students were poor, but I think I was. But it gets better. But if you live beyond your means, if you get yourself so far into debt now, it's difficult to come out from underneath that. Well, I need to move on. Look at verse 27 there. He abused the kindness of others. He actually had his debt forgiven. Sometimes when we get a sideways view of possessions and money, we abuse the kindness of others. People are kind, aren't they? And if somebody comes to you and wants to help you or wants to stand beside you when you're in a difficult situation, we've got to be careful we don't abuse that. I think the saddest part of this parable, and again, this is a fictional character, but the saddest part of the character for me is that he didn't change his lifestyle at all. I would think that having that level of debt forgiven would be life-changing, wouldn't you? And we've just got to be careful that even as we try to take good care of our possessions and we try to be faithful with our money, that we don't abuse the kindness of others. taken many students on mission trips, particularly when I was in St. Louis, and I would make them send thank yous to people who had helped them. And amazingly, I would often get feedback from the folk that got the thank yous. We've never been thanked before. Goodness gracious. If somebody helps you, even to go do something for Jesus, tell them thank you. You can't abuse the kindness of others. To me, verses 28 through 30 surely are the most troubling within this parable as I look at this character, because he valued possessions over people. See that there? That the things that he had were way more important to him than people. You know, whatever personal benefit he got from those 10,000 bags of gold were now his, right? And so someone with a much smaller debt that he could have absorbed without even realizing it is told that he has to pay back all that he has. See, when we value possessions over people, it becomes a heart issue. And it becomes something that is a fascinating test for us. I read of a person, I don't know him, I read of a person who, several years ago, was at fault for a traffic accident. It was a pretty serious traffic accident, and instead of jumping out of his vehicle to go see if the parties in the other vehicle were okay, he jumped out of his vehicle and exclaimed, "Look what you did to my car." Now, if the story's true, and I believe it to be true, if the story's true, we in those instances, in that moment of stress, in that moment of crisis, know who we really are. When we metaphorically crash into somebody somehow, and we're more worried about the damage to the possession than the effect it had on the other person, we need to be careful. We need to sit down. Because Jesus clearly valued people. He values you, and he values those around you. And as we value possessions too much, it causes us to make strange decisions, like not forgiving a minuscule debt or worrying about our vehicle when someone's hurt, or worrying about getting our way so that we can have the financial advantage when other people are being negatively affected. You fill in the blanks there. But when possessions become more important to us than people, we've got to sit down and reevaluate exactly what's happening. In a similar fashion, verse 31, I'm fascinated by this character because he's willing to sacrifice his reputation for his possessions. He didn't care what people think. He grabs this guy and shakes the daylights out of him. Everybody's obviously standing around. He didn't do it in quiet. If it had been today, there'd have been people with their phones out, right, taking a good picture of that, and he's shaking the daylights out of this guy. "Pay me back what you owe me." Pocket change the guy owed him. But he didn't care. He didn't care who saw. He didn't care what he said. He didn't care what he did. He only cared about getting that little bit back. Because he didn't care what people thought about him. He didn't care about his reputation. He simply wanted that money because he valued the money even over his own reputation, which is fascinating. And one might understand in a negative sense, okay, you value your possessions over people, but your own reputation, who people think you are, how they look at you when you look in the room, is that more valuable? And possessions, I think it is. Well, in the context of 48% of 46, sorry, don't want to misquote the study there. 46% of us still owing on last year's vacation. So we'll make a couple observations, and then I'll get out of your way. The financial decisions that we make now have consequences later. Genius, right? And so as we make decisions, we need to commit those to prayer. We need to seek good advice. Don't seek advice from the person you think is always going to say what you want to hear. Don't seek financial advice from the person who has a track record of bad finances. Seek advice from those who have carefully used their possessions as you look at spending money. There's nothing wrong with money. There's nothing wrong with spending it. But there is something wrong with trapping ourselves in so much debt that we can no longer function in a normal way. And some of these decisions we make have super long-term consequences, don't they? We sold our home in St. Louis as we moved out to Florida, and the family that bought it were a delightful family. But he had purchased a car several years before from a probably less than reputable dealer. It wasn't running well. He took it back and said, "I need you to fix the car." And when he went back the next week, not only was his car gone, but all the other cars were gone. Everything was gone. So he just forgot about it and moved on, except when he went to buy a house, what showed up on his credit report. Those decisions we make can have consequences years later. Be careful. Be careful as you make them. Hey, will you just save yourself a lot of grief and don't live beyond your means? I made the statement I'm about to make to you to the students, and several of them came up to me like I was a genius, which made me sad. Spend less than you make. Sometimes that's not very fun at all. Sometimes it's actually awful. But as we spend less than we make, whatever you make, spend less. As we spend less than we make, we don't get ourselves into those difficult situations. You know, sometimes things are tight. Sometimes things are rough. Listen, I've been there. I've been unemployed, and I've been, burning off savings to pay for the house. I've been there. But we've got to spend less than we make. We've got to be careful with what we have, because if we get ourselves too deep into debt, then when we come out of that, you get that new job or things get better, the skies clear up. Now you're still dragging that debt along with you, and it's going to stop you. Be careful. Be careful to spend less than you make. No matter what, please don't be willing to sacrifice your relationships or your reputation or the reputation of God for some temporary gain. Be generous with what you have. My family and I have given at least a tithe all of our lives, all of our married lives. And I want to tell you, there's joy in that. It's a statement to God and a statement to those around us. This isn't about you giving more to the church. It's about you using your money well, and a part of that is being generous. It's a statement to God that we're depending on Him to do more with the 80 or 90% than we could do on our own with the 100%. And I'll tell you the honest truth, I found that to be more than true. And finally, would you just remember that it is temporary? It really is. They say you can't take it with us, but 4 guys got together and decided that they were going to take it with them. And unfortunately, one of the 4 passed away, and so they're at the casket, and they all decided they're all going to chip in $10,000. So the first guy comes up and he puts $10,000 in the casket. And the second guy comes up and he puts $10,000 in the casket. And the third guy came up and put a $30,000 check in the casket and took the rest with him. You know, that wasn't in my notes. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, how often do you get to tell that story, right? But it's temporary. It's temporary. You know, moths and things do break in and steal, and thieves do take, and honor God by how you earn your money and how you use your money. And I want to stop with this. In 2015, Chris Jansen released a song, "Buy Me a Boat." Now, if you've never heard that song, we live in different worlds. And while I don't appreciate all the lyrics to his song, it's a fascinating window into modern culture. The theme of the song is that if he won the lottery or had a rich uncle that passed away, he'd have a lot of money. And he says money doesn't buy everything, but, and now you have the song running through your head, don't you? But one of the phrases in there, he says this, I think it's fascinating. "I keep hearing that money is the root of all evil, and you can't fit a camel through the eye of a needle." And here he says, "I'm sure that's probably true, but it still sounds pretty cool." And I'm interested in this because the Bible, first of all, doesn't say that money is the root of all evil. It says that the love of money is the root of all evil. And a camel through the eye of a needle is a metaphor for doing something very difficult. But moving on from that, I'd like to talk with Chris about the last part of what he said, because it fascinates me, because I think he's captured with that admission something that is very true in our society. That the statement that Jesus makes there, that money is the root of all, or the love of money is the root of all evil, and you can't fit a camel through the eye of a needle, that's probably true, but yet I must be the exception because it still sounds pretty cool. But none of us are the exception. And we need to start taming this desire that we have for more and living beyond our means and lying to ourselves that we deserve this, so in order to get it, we're going to go into debt that we know we can't cover. And we need to learn to honor God with our finances when we have less and when we have more, so that we can honor Him with how we live our lives. I really do appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm thankful for that, and I'm thankful for the partnership that we have together. I do hope that God will raise up leaders out of this church that will come to KCU and be trained for ministry. Let me pray for you.